Yeah. All right, guys, take it away.
Thank you. I just want to tie into the last session that we looked at with the detect and response part. I mean, it was really a small footprint, like they said, the beginner way for everyone to do what they should be doing. But think about that for a second. How many of you guys would ever detect what Magnus could see with these simple tools? And another thing that's pretty interesting is that was actually the captures of the attacks done first day. So they were actually capturing this stuff from the real environment where we did the first pen test hacking session. So I don't think maybe you didn't notice, but that's pretty cool. So they could actually see exactly what they were doing with simple tools. And the important thing here is that those are tools that you're not using, most of you guys. And even some of the SOCs that you subscribe to, they can't even see that because they're not on that level. Looking at what's really happening in the system, not just relying on some commercial tool. So I think that's important to understand. Now we're going to talk about nation-state sponsored attacks. And we're actually going to talk a little bit about what's happening in the world, but that's going to be 2 seconds. The focus here is to show you what an attack looks like and what the thought process is behind it. So, but we see new trends. We see organized crime turning cyber. We also see single hackers turning into teams, and the effect is that we see more and more advanced attacks targeting organizations, government agencies, and things like that. So what used to be something simple is now often something very complex that leads to real severe damage. We also see nation state. This is China. These are some actually famous guys because they're on FBI's most wanted list. But you need to realize that these guys are sitting in their big houses in China, going on vacations. They don't go to Miami though. That would make them get picked up on the airport, randomly selected. This is actually North Korea, and you shouldn't think that they're not efficient because of their young age. They've been working for 16 years already. That's North Korean policy. Take them young. Anyhow, looking at red team, what we do, and this is something that the guys in my team do on a regular basis, this is a way to measure if you're vulnerable to those big attacks. And a typical red team is somewhere in the area of 1,000 to 2,000 man-hours of hacking. So I want you to get an insight into what that is. And then we're going to show you how the thought process is and do some live red teaming, if you will. Of course, in a very compressed format, because normally you don't do 2,000 hours in 1 hour. So what we basically measure is we measure the entry points. That is usually server-side, client-side, wireless, and physical. So we measure them one by one, but it's not like a normal pen test where you say, well, you have this list of vulnerabilities with this severity. We actually also measure the difficulty, the sophistication of the attacker needed in order to be able to do this exploitation. So then you know that maybe you're vulnerable, but only to a nation state or some expert team. You would not be vulnerable to a regular single hacker or an activist. So you can actually get yourself a sophistication level resistance. We also measure the time it takes to exploit. So you know that, well, you can exploit this, but it would take a lot of time. So still, a normal hacker wouldn't go for that, but a nation state would use that time. And we also measure time to detection. And this is really interesting. I'm going to get back to that. After we do the initial, we go to internal system. You recognize this from the earlier sessions, but it's another point we measure. So you get times on this as well. And then we go to infrastructure compromise, which is normally domain controller compromisation. But it could also be the entire virtualization layer or the entire remote keyboard infrastructure that can run code on anything with the KVM switches. Something that can give you real access to the platform. It could potentially even be the underlying NetApp file system things. If you could take all the computers' full images. So don't get confused. You go for the domain because that's easiest. Virtualization platform. Typical things. So anything that will make me able to affect the entire organization, basically. And then for the high-value targets, we measure all this. And usually, people in the high-value target section, maybe the guys running the mainframes, they get really surprised when they realize that they did all these security things, but just by owning the infrastructure, we basically had access to them already. So in reality, this is a typical result of a pen test, a red team exercise. We could prove that you could get in through physical. We could prove that you could get in through user devices. Typically, when you get through one of the layers, you usually always compromise all of the others. But here you get measurements, your time of resistance. If it's long enough, it's good. You can communicate with a CEO or a C-level management and say, is it acceptable that you can break in and take over the entire infrastructure in 5 working days? Yes or no? They can say, no, well, it should take at least 20. So now you have a number. So next year when we come back, you have a number. You can aim higher, and you can do some things in order to get to that number. So basically what we measure, and this is important to understand, is we measure the capacity to protect, the capacity to detect, and the capacity to respond. And one thing that we see a lot when we do this, because one of the deliverables is also what we call SOC trimming. So if they have detection capabilities and respond capabilities, they actually do the investigation of what they find. Sometimes they don't find anything, then they know they have things to learn, so we will provide them with all the details of the attack so they can trim their SOC. Sometimes they find things. And it's really interesting because normally when you do some investigation of a cybercrime, you will never really know what happened. Your report is your belief of exactly what happened, right? In this case, they will present the report on the investigation, and they don't even know this is a test. They believe this is the real attack. And then afterwards, we present ours, and then there is a gap. And that is such a great learning experience, because then the SOCs can improve and get better for next year. So we trim each other. They get better, we have to step up, they have to step up. So this is how we work. We are the red team, they are the blue team, and we work together that way. We do this with banks, government organizations in this country. And it's really efficient, because this is an ongoing threat. The threat actors are getting better every year. So we have as well, the SOCs have as well. So we can play the blue team, we can play the red team. Sometimes we even play both teams. It's crazy, but I think it's better than nothing. There aren't that many good teams out there. That was me, sorry. So this is a typical example of a completely anonymized red team scenario. So there is nothing here that can lead anyone to the owner of this. We do a lot of mappings like this. But just to give you an idea of what a red team is, or the attack will look like. So in this case, I'm going to do this very compressed. There are some different vulnerabilities on web servers when we tested the public channel. And we found that using them together, we could actually execute code. You couldn't do it on one single vulnerability, but using 3 different ones, we could actually execute code on one system. They had such strict exfiltration policies, we could not really get a good connect back session. So we had to use the DNS to exfiltrate data and set up a tunnel using DNS tunneling, which does not have really good performance, but that worked. We were surprised that it works because some people actually look into that. This was a high-profile environment. Anyhow, sitting at this platform, this was completely isolated dependency-wise from the internal network, but not network segmented-wise. So we could actually access a test segment. And on that test segment, there was an unauthenticated service running. And it was not, it actually says Jenkins. That's the one thing we didn't anonymize. It has some test functionality for applications. You could actually speak a certain language to the Jenkins that's called Groovy. So we created some Groovy hacking tools in order to execute code on the underlying operating system. Using that, we could steal credentials. Using that, we could find account dependencies to another test server. As it always happens, sooner or later, a domain admin logged on. That domain admin took us to the domain controllers in the test domain. Let's just call it test domain. I know it wasn't, but it makes it more anonymous. Yeah. So in that test domain, it was not the real domain that we wanted to access. It was not the domain with the high-value targets on it. But there was some interesting synchronization going on between the domain controllers in both domains. Because if you're a domain admin or some admin dude, and you work in both environments, do you want to have different passwords? No, that's just boring. And it's also cumbersome. So using some technology here, we ended up in this domain. Started to look at LinkedIn for the right kind of people working the mainframes. Some problems with access to the mainframes is also easy to circumvent because you can get into the firewall controller admin stations, put keyloggers on them, then access the firewall controller and change the firewall rules so that you can access the mainframes from the test segment in a very controlled fashion, of course. We don't want to increase exposure. And then go for the mainframe guys, put keyloggers on their computers or extract their startup scripts or whatever needed in order to get access to the systems. What you don't really see in this picture, that is the problem in the reality for these testers and for the hackers. You're afraid that the black boxes are going to go away, but they're going to stay. So it's the fact that when you sit here on the console, and this is what the real threat actor does, this is why the sophistication is higher. Not only do you find all these vulnerabilities and do DNS tunneling, but you end up remoting this machine from somewhere on the web. And then you tunnel your connection here. So you're basically sitting here. You're tunneling your connection to this guy. From this guy, you're jumping to this guy. From this guy, you're jumping to this guy. From this guy, you're jumping to this guy. So every time you sit on this guy, executing command on this guy, tunnels here, there, and all the way. So sometimes you can actually go for a break and wait for the response when you send the command to the target. It's really a tough process. So that's why there's a difference between a nation-state attacker and a script kiddie, if you will. So how do we do this? This is just what we do. How we do it, we follow the process. We do some real preparation stages that you can never detect because we do them offline. And then when we go online, we prepare the engagement of getting code into that environment. And then we make sure that we can have maintained presence. And then we start to go for the goals. And this is actually a detailed process. You have to be very professional when you do this, because you can actually interrupt the operations of these systems. You really plan, you do some research, you acquire specific knowledge about this victim, you complete the preparations, and then you start. Now you plan how to interact with the victim, what vulnerabilities to exploit, and how to deliver. And then you establish your access. Then you hide in the system. So you go through all these steps before you start to do what you're supposed to be doing. In a red team, we're never just two people, we're a team. So sometimes team A will take us from engagement to presence. They will get us in. And then when we're in, they enable operations for others. So they actually create command and control nodes for the others and give them tasks to do. And this is exactly how nation-state operators operate. We see this when we do investigations. We can actually see this is when they set up this part of the process. Now there are new threat actors coming in new CC channels. So we measure this because we really understand how this works. So if you're interested in this process, we actually follow a known process called the Cyber Threat Framework. This is an open framework. It's from the US. But just how we plan and resource and what we call it. So we have a unified language for this. So you can actually Google for this if you're interested. You can download the framework. And with that said, I'm going to leave to the hardcore keyboard guys. I'm not one of those anymore. I'm getting old. They're faster than me on the keyboard. To show you and to start to simulate in a very compressed format again. In 45 minutes, they're going to simulate a 1,500-hour test. So take it away, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, folks, it's time to see what we can do and have an idea about how we think.
Yeah, so we heard Marcus talking about red teams and APTs and how they work, and we obviously try to simulate that as much as possible during our red team assignments. So, for example, during a penetration test, we use our own laptops, we use our own virtual machines, and we connect directly to target environment. But we can't do that in a red team assignment. So what we need to do is we need to set up our support infrastructure. We need SMTP servers, we need command and control servers. If we know that the target is using Azure, for example, we might put some reflector services in Azure that reflects the traffic to our command and control servers. We also need to segmentate this, because as we know, Magnus and the other blue guys, they find our indicators, they find our IP addresses, and as soon as they found our IP address, we can't use that anymore. It's already known to the blue guys, so we need to have additional infrastructure to move on to additional command and control servers to hide our tracks.
Yeah, so basically what we're going to do, we're going to take the same environment we used for the first 2 attack sessions, but now we've done some improvement on it. So there are some new features. Some of the things that the other guys talked about in the protect sessions, there isn't going to be everything they talked about. That's not very feasible and not even realistic. But we're going to see what the difference really is when you start having some of these things from our perspective now. And then when we wrap it up, we're going to see really what the difference is from both sides of the fight, if you will. So we're going to try to go through the typical planning and discussions we have when we begin these type of assignments. So we're going to start with basically the structure is going to be the same that we talked about before. So we're still going to have an entry point in some way, and then we're going to proceed from there. So we're going to have to start with deciding which entry point to start looking into. And I know David has done some research on our target already, at least on the external exposure. So what can you tell us?
As you guys know, it's way more effective to try to target your victims remotely because it's safer. So I went through their web applications, no luck. They use commonly known CMS, not so many plugins, so it's harder to find bugs. I think we can, if we want, we can spend time trying to find a 0-day in their web application, but it's not very time effective.
Is it an open source framework they use, or is it some
it's
product you
open
buy?
source, so we can look into the code, but it has been here a long time. So there are, I mean, this has been the usual infancy period where you find a lot of bugs, but nowadays it's pretty solid. Again, they don't use a lot of plugins, so it's harder to get there. I found a VPN service, but they have two-factor authentication, so that's not going to work. Right. I found some entries in their DNS. I've been just going through a list of common host names, and I found an entry. I know it's there, but I don't get responses back. That means they probably have whitelisting, and it's a support subdomain. So maybe they are like a third-party contractor or some partner that's helping them, but that means probably IP whitelisting.
Yeah, something like that.
So attacking them seems like a long way to reach our goal.
Yeah, well, it could be, depending on who they are. It could be way easier to get into that third-party organization first and then take it from there, provided it is in scope. That's a question that criminals don't usually ask themselves.
Yeah, other stuff that I found in the DNS is that they are using Google application for business. They have an entry in the DNS with the Google information, so they use like Gmail probably for their email. Again, two-factor authentication. The guys are protecting their external border as much as possible.
Okay.
So
we could invest some time in that open source if we want to.
Yeah.
So we know we can have it in our to-do list. Let's see if there are some quicker things to do first.
Sure.
What about physical exposure? Kenneth?
Yeah, so I prepared some hardware stuff, a small Raspberry Pi computer to bring with me, and I did something that most hackers fear, including myself. I left my computer and I walked into the real world. And I called the target company. I set up a meeting with the salesperson from them. When I got there, I noticed that they have a guard watching the entrance. They have a man trap, so you can't just walk behind the employee to get into the building. Once inside the meeting room, though, I did notice some network sockets in the walls, However, I didn't get to be alone for long enough to plug myself into them. However, though, after the meeting, I went to the backside of their offices, and I noticed that I could reach their Wi-Fi network. So it's a password-protected network. I waited for a while until a client connected. I grabbed the handshake. I went back to my secure world of my computer. I created a word list based on the intelligence that we collected from this company. And I started cracking this Wi-Fi handshake. So if they have a weak password in any sense, if they use their organization name in the password, their address of their offices in their password, something like that, hopefully in a couple of days we will crack that and have a Wi-Fi endpoint to connect to.
Yeah, maybe we could go there again, like in 2 people, so we can distract, but it's risky. It's always risky. So
Definitely.
I think we have someone there that's going to help us.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't really talked about the user devices part, so building out phishing attacks. That what we see in the news tell us that these are very effective, and we talked about it before already. We showed a couple of examples, and we also talked about that when we really craft spear phishing attacks, so phishing attacks targeted to specific individuals and based on a lot of information that we have gathered before, then we can get that hit rate pretty high.
Oh,
So-
sure. For you people here, maybe you don't remember, but on the first session, we have seen that their website is about medical stuff. They're treating delicate information. And we also discovered that they had some problems in the past few weeks.
Yeah, they had some issues with the confidential information that was leaked, and someone that was reporting something. So they had some issues in relation to that. So that's typical good information that you could see about an organization that you could use within a phishing attack, because it's something real. It's something that they are really onto at the moment. So they would react more on that type of information. So let's switch over to the demo machine. And
Wrong button.
yeah. So we have prepared that phishing attack. So let's see what it looks like. It's an email we're going to send. The subject is going to be important, leaked confidential document. That's going to be the text that we prepared. Now I'm using my name as sender. I'm going to guess they don't know me, but we can choose another name too. Well, this is basically going to say that whoever this person is received information that CNN published some information on their site about a confidential report that was leaked that I believe is coming from your organization. Can you please confirm this? Because it's very important. Again, this is something recent that happened in that organization, so it would make it would make more sense for that person to be triggered by this type of email. And this points to CNN Global News.site. Now, of course, we can register whatever domain is available out there, and there are different techniques to make that look legit. So that's one example. So that points to a zip file, which the victim is going to click, and it's going to get the zip file from CNN Global News.site. It's going to open it. There's a folder in it. In there, there is a PDF file.
Yeah, PDF.
Yeah. What it looks to be a PDF file, this is actually a shortcut if you look at the detailed view. Right, so let's click on that one. And well, we want to open that PDF because that email sounded very important. And basically, we end up on this document.
So it's a PDF file.
It is a PDF file.
Trust us.
So let's switch to the attacker machine. You've seen this before, right?
One interesting thing, here you see the address of localhost, is because, as Kenneth said before, we have an infrastructure here. We have a public server, and they're going to talk about this in a moment, which is basically, we can say, a web server. And then that forwards some traffic to another small service that we have there. So it's basically talking to itself, but we are gaining a connection from the outside world.
Exactly.
Yes.
We can see here, this works kind of like the Empire agent that we saw yesterday. It's polling. You can see here behind that it's polling, asking the command and control server, do you have anything for me to do, basically? And so here we have our payloads in the cookies. As we saw, we know that Magnus is fluent with base64 encoding. So this is actually encrypted cookies.
Not just encoded this time. So.
And the polling interval, obviously we can set it as we want. So basically what you want to do when you get inside the network, you need to have, if you get caught by the blue team, you get thrown out, you don't have any way in. So the first thing we want to do is get persistence inside that environment. And we don't want that persistence to go to the same command and control servers as our regular tunnel is going, because then when Magnus finds that, he finds our persistence as well. So here we need to have segmented infrastructure for our persistence that might pull out once a week or once a month or whenever we want it to pull out. And then we might just tell it to sleep because we're not caught yet. But if we get caught, we can use that to get a foothold inside the environment once again.
Yeah, so we need to also tailor how we configure that reverse shell to connect to our attacker machine. Now, this is a custom shell that we're using, which actually simulates real web traffic, right? So if you would have to, if you would go into the network and look at the traffic, this is real HTTP traffic. There are, in this case, cookies that are used for communication, but you could use whatever. It can be a custom header, it can be something in the body, like an image, and encoded whatever that you can put into the request and response, which, as we said, is encrypted. But you can configure the reverse shell to have different polling intervals and size, right?
Exactly. As we can see also, since the data is in the cookies have different sizes depending on the payload and the data exfiltrated from the system. So if we run a command, for example, we're going to see that there's going to be a difference in how the cookies look. And like Fabio said, this is custom tools. We rely on our own toolbox in some extent, and we rely on open source tools out there in some extent. And that's also a major difference between our red teaming assignments and our penetration test, obviously, that we use our custom tools. If someone would find this and browse to the endpoint, it would look like a regular website, which you can browse, which you can just click around on, like any other web application out there.
Yeah, and it's not like no one uses encrypted cookies. Encrypted cookies are the norm for a lot of web applications. So it's very plausible. Also, we are not loading the same page over and over again. We're opening different pages. So it's pretty much like browsing. Yet, we should say that in this case, it's PowerShell browsing the website.
Yeah,
Another scenario could be Bash browsing a website, which is odd stuff.
That's right. So if we would go on the host and actually look for all this chain of events of what's going on, like Magnus showed you in his examples, you would still see that you have you have this process, in this case, the PowerShell process making outbound connection, even though that looks like web traffic. If you link it back to the host, you will see it's PowerShell. You will see it's spawned from well, what do we use now? We use a shortcut. In that shortcut, there was a PowerShell command directly, right?
Yeah.
So that should be Explorer just spawning that directly, right?
Yeah.
You don't go through the C script interpreter this
No,
time, because we don't have a
it's
JavaScript
direct.
file like we had before.
We will have Explorer and PowerShell. So it's direct. You can see that but you can see that right before that, there's been opened a zip file, and you can see that your link.
No, it's not a zip file this time.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there was a zip file this time. Sorry, my
So
bad.
you can
That's
see
right.
that the link, instead of being on the desktop or any other, the start menu or whatever, it's in the temp document, in the temp directory, which is not something where users store their links. So
Yes.
there are
and it would be
clues.
called something confidential document .pdf.lnk.
Yeah, and the problem for us is that now we are going to we are running as fast as we can. Usually we cannot be so noisy.
Yeah.
This is something that can take us maybe one day just to do some basic exploration that we're going to do now, because
Yeah, exactly. If you see the logs here, I mean, you have some polling going every couple of seconds, basically. That's every time that the client tells us that he's ready to execute commands. Normally, you don't want all that noise on the network for no reason. You maybe want one polling once an hour, so you actually only get the chance to run 24 commands a day, for example. And that's one command. And you also need to tailor how big the size of the request and response can be. So you can only get a few things at a time. So sometimes we actually run something and go to lunch, come back, and maybe if we're lucky, we have the result. So yes, now obviously we're going to compress this as much as possible. So let's continue from here. We have a foothold in the environment.
Yeah, we've been through the stuff as you did on the second session before. Well, actually, I think we didn't run a who am I now, so we can at least see that we are there.
Yeah, sure. Let's do who am I, see that we are that user again, Leon Vargo. Poor Leon is taking all the heat these days.
Yeah. And unfortunately, let's say that we have been through the infrastructure trying to get in clues about what to do next. And we found that they're doing a pretty good hardening around here. We don't have free access all over the place like we did before. We got an idea about that file with the SQL script that we have seen before, installation.
Yes, yes.
But I don't think this time we are going to get access to it.
Well, let's see. We can skip that part.
We can show it maybe just pretty quickly.
Yes. So remember this directory, Corp internal tools, sequencing service. That's where we found the SQL installation file with credentials for the SQL account. So let's try to access that from here. Well, this time we're getting a permission denied on that folder, which is really what it should be, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it looks like they did their homework. They actually went back home and try to categorize their data and what they have in their network and only make sure that the right accounts have access to certain data. So that's proper access control. That's how it should be.
Yeah, it's our first step back now. We have to look at the situation and understand what to do. And again, when all the technical vulnerabilities.
Yeah, it's a solution for us, I guess.
Are not available, then we revert back. We can go there and exploit some information that we gather, or we can exploit the humans. And so we have social networks on the web where people describe what they do. So yeah, we were looking for SQL something. So we've been browsing LinkedIn and found this nice dude, William Fredette, which is a SQL Server database administrator working our corp.site.
That looks like a good target.
Yeah, it's a perfect target. But you know what? Instead of running an external attack again that maximizes our chances to be noticed by someone, we're going to run in another way. We're in the internal network, so why don't we pose as this guy? Alex Matthews is working in IT support, so he's taking care of computers, configurations, problems on the machines all over the place.
Yeah, because we have internal access, right? We have one client, doesn't matter who that is, we have access to the internal.
Yeah, we have a lot of means at our disposal to build trust in our victim. And I think you have prepared something for us.
Really? I think so. Yes, no, but that's a really great example of using something that you have already and leverage that to build something like this.
So exactly, we already have internal access, so let's utilize that. If we want to attack one of these people, we tailor a new phishing email, targeted phishing email, but instead of hosting our malware on our command and control servers or outside their environment, when we already have access to their environment, let's find a common share that we know that employees use to share documents and stuff. We put our malware in that share instead. And the benefit from that is that it looks more trustworthy. It's from within the network. So they're more likely to click that link and open that document and execute our code. Another benefit is that we don't have to do an external connection to get our payload. So if there's a hardened shell that investigates the traffic, for example, we're already inside, so we don't have to do an external connection.
Yeah, and I mean, we're targeting a tech person, so they're going to be way resistant to common things. They're not going to click all over the place. But if I'm a colleague going through my email server and sending me something which is on my file server, then, well, it's possible. Actually, fun story, this comes from a real situation where we posed as the head of IT security saying, we had a breach, you have to run this cleanup utility, and please run it, and it works.
Yes. So I'm basically going through that while you guys are talking about it. So what I did, as my current infected computer session or client session, I have downloaded a file from the outside that I call client health status.js, and I placed it in a place where I can write as a regular user, just a common share that everybody has access to. And then I verified that it is there. Right? There are a couple of things to realize here. We're still using PowerShell to make an outbound connection, downloading files, and doing all this invoke expression, and creating a web client object and all of that stuff. So first of all, if you have good host-based detection techniques, this should really trigger some alarms. So from now on, we should really assume that they're onto us. So we have a very limited time. Now there is probably Magnus trying to do some copy-paste in Kibana, trying to figure out what's going on. So we have some time, but we should. Sorry, man.
Yeah, you should assume breach. We should assume detection.
Yes, good point. So that's one thing. And of course, they could have some more hardening measures. I mean, we could be running PowerShell in restricted mode, right? Now we don't, so we can do all that fancy stuff with the .NET framework. So just things to think about. If that was the case, we would have to take another step back and think of another way. So it's part of the process. All right, so I put that file in the share. Now this is William for that client. He's gonna receive this email now. That's what it's gonna look like. This is coming from Alex Matthew that we found also on LinkedIn. That's his internal email address, because we are internal. And while we're asking William, look, we're having some issues here. Can you please run this small script for us to verify that nothing strange is going on with the alarms we're getting from your workstation? And well, if you tailor this well enough, maybe William is even busy that day. Maybe you could even see that, and you just choose the right time for him to think less. So he's going to open this file. It's coming from the internal file share. Come on. It's internal.
In fact, you don't get warnings like we did before, for example.
Yeah, it's just going to open it. It's going to do running some tests. Final test done. Now William, if he's nice, is going to reply back to Alex and say, yeah,
done.
I've done it. So this was the result. Thank you. Well, thank you, William. Now we have a new shell. Who am I here? I'm William now. That's great. So let's see if our assumption was correct, that this guy would have access to those type of files on the share. That's SQL sync service installer script.
Drum roll.
Boom. The first boom of the day. Actually,
yeah.
Not of the day, of the session. So that's our SQL installer file. And we've seen this before, right? Yesterday morning. This contains credentials. Now, this is not as critical if you look at it from a higher perspective, because only very specific people have access to it. But with some extra work and with some added vulnerabilities and jumping from within the internal network with the internal phishing, we could get to the right person and read out that file.
And this is something that is more common than it appears. We found it a lot, both the credentials and the blind trust into colleagues.
Yeah, I mean,
without verifying it makes sense. But when you receive something out of the ordinary, you should try to verify the source. And reading an email is not a good way to verify the source. You should like call back. Or maybe write to William, to Alex, but it depends. If we hacked into his email account, then we would have taken care of that with some rules, and you can do that in any email client or server, so that's a way around it.
I want to add one more thing here. Now we have two shells going on, one coming from Leon, one coming from William. Now, if we were to try and hide our traces, we wouldn't use the same command and control server to connect to. That's one thing. We're going to use two separate infrastructures. So if they find this on the network level, then the second connection is going to look completely different. Also, we're going to move away from Leon. Not now, but in theory, we don't need it, right? We already have one. You want to keep one backup, but the first infection is the place you just want to run away from as soon as possible, because that's the easiest to find. So as soon as we have something else, just run away from there.
Yeah, and now, if you remember from yesterday, we have a couple of SQL servers. We have a 2012 R2 and a 2016. Actually, what would you target first? SQL server, which one? The 2012 R2? Raise your hands. Some. The 2016, raise your hands. Nearly the same, and a lot of people is going to trust us. Oh, yeah, you're going to do, and the servers do, because we are not going to go for the fancy stuff. We are going to go for the effective stuff. We want to be fast. We want to find the path of least possible resistance. So we're going to target the older one first, because maybe they didn't implement all the new fancy security measures. For two reasons. Maybe they installed it and leave it like it was, or yeah, there's some stuff that is new and it's not available for an older server. So we're going to try with that one first.
Yeah, and we want extra credentials, right? And we know that this organization have put some effort into hardening measures. So we probably will find some resistance when we try to extract credentials.
Yep.
And as you're saying, I mean, if we have a choice to go for a system that has less fancy features, of course we go to that one first.
Sure.
And I mean, how likely is it to switch to only 2016 servers tomorrow?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, there's going to be some transition time, right?
Yeah, that's what we are going to exploit through the entire talk. It's a mixture of finding the right combination. We have to create our own luck. So we are going to try to go for the stuff that works first. And then, if it doesn't work, we're going to back up and do something else.
Right. So
let's just go for it.
Let's try to, actually, this time I would prefer to have an interactive shell on the SQL server, so we could actually move away from the clients if we want to, only keep shell from server. Sometimes that's preferable. If it's a type of organization that looks more into clients in terms of detection, which is a more natural way to begin with, right? Because the clients most often get infected. So let's, just like we've done before, we define the credentials that we have retrieved from the file on the share. This time we're going to run a different command on SQL1. The command is going to pop up a new shell. This time we're going to be on SQL1. So that's the successful execution of the remote WMI command. And that's the shell coming from SQL1. And that's the second boom.
Yeah.
So let's see. Sessions interact with 3, hostname, SQL1.
That's the boom.
Yes. Now Magnus will see hostname.exe that is spawned by the PowerShell, which is spawned by the remote WMI process. So again, if they have good detection, we know that they will probably see this lateral movement activity. So we need to either run really fast, but then will make us noisy, or I mean, we could possibly do some diversions attack as well. Maybe we're going to do just a simple command on all servers in the environment and just confuse them.
Noise helps a lot. Even doing something incredibly stupid, like a middle ground phishing attack or a very noisy vulnerability scan on their public stuff. So they're going to focus on something else while we'll slowly but surely continue with our stuff.
Exactly. I mean, they're going to have limited resources now. They can't be everywhere at the same time.
Yeah,
do something somewhere else.
And we are able to launch 100 machines on the cloud and told them, yeah, go scan these guys. So in this case, it's on our advantage. The noise is going to help a lot.
All right, let's move on. Let's, just like we did before, try to extract credentials using PowerShell in memory.
Sure.
Let's run that.
Let's see. It's not going to work.
No luck.
What happens if you do... this is fishy.
I mean, it's a 2012R2, right? We can access the memory.
Yeah, a sign has been there.
Yeah, a sign has been there. I would guess there is LSA protection here. That's the best you can do on 2012R2 in terms of accessing the LSA's memory.
So maybe we can target...
There is actually a registry key we can verify.
Yeah, sure.
That is the case.
Or you have your copy-paste stuff.
Yeah, I always do my copy-paste hacking. That's how I roll. So we can see that the LSA is running as a protected process, because that's set to 1. So
now we know that it's possible to circumvent this if we go high to the kernel level, or low to the kernel level.
Yeah.
But first, let's see if it's worth it. Because to do this, we have to install a driver.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like saying, hey, Blue Team, I'm here. I'm installing drivers on your servers, and no one is logged in, or something like that. So we can take a look around at the processes there.
That's right, actually. Just do a simple task list /v. Let's just see who is running things here. Well, that's us. And then we have local system, network service, local service, boring, boring, boring. OK.
You know what? It's time to go back, in my opinion.
OK, OK. But we do have one other system we can access, right?
Yep. So let's see.
So let's go on SQL 2 and try to extract credentials from there.
Yeah.
It's a 2016.
Probably other stuff. We're going to find a way. We have other options. We can just wait. We stay there and script something, log on for every user. So as soon as anyone will log in on that machine, we will get another shell back. If we are lucky, we gain a domain administrator or someone with higher privileges on the domain, then we can escalate and go on with that. But let's continue. We don't have some weeks to wait.
Yeah, yeah. But another thing we could do, actually, is to try, like we've done before, to extract the local admin password.
Yeah. Spoiler alert, they have labs. So that's not going to work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's not going to. But labs only works with one account. So you can set which account to cover with the labs feature.
Yeah.
So it's going to auto-generate and automatically change passwords for the local administrator account, whichever you set, but that's only one. So if you have some other ad hoc created local admin accounts, they're not going to be covered by labs. So that's the possibility that they maybe have it. I'm still on SQL 1 now, so I can actually check what local users they have. Well, they only have the administrator and the guest. So if you say they use labs, and I believe you, then they have targeted the administrator account, and there isn't much we can do here. It should be unique.
Yeah, another thing is getting back to William and see if maybe has administrative rights from the domain on some machines, and then we can gain the labs passwords. But yeah, let's go for the server first, because
so
we are already there. We can just reuse something that it's working. And again, we don't have so much time.
No, because Magnus is probably on to us. No. So we're in SQL 2 now. Let's try to extract credentials.
Yeah. Now we are using this same exact technique as the other attack session, trying to get something. And we'll see.
Well, we're getting something.
I see long strings. I don't like long strings.
Yeah, I don't like long strings, right?
We should have run
What's this? Anybody remembers?
No.
Nobody remembers? So there is some data there. Actually, if we look into up here, we have the corp administrator, as a domain administrator, is found in LSAS, but the LSA data is isolated. So this is credential guard.
We cannot dump those credentials, but it's there.
Yeah, it is there.
And we are system.
I mean, we are system. We do have system access.
Wait, any clue about this? There's an administrator logged in, and we are system, but we cannot get the credentials. Is there any other way that you guys can think about? Come on, anything. Shout something, notepad, whatever. Sorry? Nearly.
Well, in a way.
Yeah, we can say that.
We could, yeah. You do have your Kerberos tickets, or the domain administrator in this example has Kerberos tickets in that session. So that account is going, I mean, that process is going to have single sign-on to other resources. So it's going to be a valid ticket there.
And we can use it.
Yeah, exactly. So what we can do, actually, to do it in a more smooth way is to run a specific piece of code or a specific command into the domain admin process context, which is going to have single sign-on. If we pull that off, we're going to act in that context without ever need to extract those credentials. We're still going to have single sign-on as domain administrator.
Yeah.
Right?
So let's
There's still a couple of conditions, though, because we don't know. Maybe they're using
what they have.
Exactly. Yeah. Maybe they're using RDP restricted access or some other features that will not expose credentials.
But there's only one way to know.
Yeah, so let's do that.
And now we're not going to do anything fancy. We are just going to migrate to one of the processes. So we inject our code in one of the running processes from the administrator there.
Yeah, actually, let's just do a task list /v.
Yeah, so we get something. Otherwise, it's going to be quite hard to
exactly. So
do anything. This is something, actually, we should have done first because we are being noisy now again. Running a task list should tell us that we have administrator logged in, so it's worth doing all these passages that we are doing now.
Exactly. And then if you know there is a domain admin there, you're really going to run and do all you can on this server right now. And then if you manage to get that access, then you lay low for a while.
Yeah.
But this is our chance. There is a domain admin on the server where we are local system, so let's do it right now. We can see we have a LSA isolated process here. So that's a confirmation of credential guard running. So like we said before, let's run a command into a different context, a process owned by the corp administrator account.
I see one nice process there.
Yeah, let's choose a fairly stable process, explorer.exe, PID 2352. We're going to use a script called invoke ps inject, which we're going to interpret in memory. So now we have it as a function. This one will allow us to point to a certain process. I forgot the ID now. 2352. 235. Let me check. I don't want to do this twice. 2352. Yeah. I had it. I should trust myself. 2352.
Now we are trying to migrate to that process, so we are going to gain the same access possibilities if there are any, and exploit a single sign-on to continue with our infiltration, basically.
If the demo gods are with us, that PowerShell code will execute in the other context and pop up a new shell.
And usually this is a very intense moment because you have to act quickly. Still, you're going through maybe 3, 4, 5 different systems, and you have been trying to keep your traffic low. So maybe this is going to take between 5 minutes, if you're lucky, and 30 minutes, where anything can happen. We need a very strict window of opportunity, because as soon as that administrator logs off, we lost all our chances, because all the processes are going to die. If the administrator is lazy and is just going to close the terminal server window, then we still have time. But
If they don't use RDP restricted admin.
true that.
But
that
we got a
applies
shell
anyway.
now. We got a shell. Background this one. So now let's see, first of all, host name. We're still on SQL 2. So
We expected
we're still
that.
there, yes. If we do who am I? Now we're the domain administrator.
And now is where you guys applause.
We're still in a situation that we need to act really fast because we're in a live process.
Yeah, but we would have danced, I think.
So let's confirm this.
Yeah.
The
This is-
dc01.corp.local admin $. Yes,
We
we
are
are
single
domain
sign-on.
admin. Single sign-on to the domain controller. Boom. So, so a couple of words just. How will we proceed from here? I mean, we need to somehow get persistent,
Yeah.
right, in a quick way, and then basically lay low for a while. So what? I mean, we could do different things. I don't know if we have time to demo it. We're going to run a bit over time.
What if can we launch it and then maybe get it back later?
Sure. Actually, I'm just going to throw it there for you guys. A couple of commands. What we're going to do is that we're going to, since we're a domain admin, right now we're going to do a this is sync, so the domain controller synchronization. We're going to sync a specific object from the domain controller, and we're going to extract the password hash of a very special account in the domain. That account, yeah, go ahead.
That account will let us forge as many tickets as we want and gain any privilege we want on the domain. A lot of people probably already have heard of that. It's golden ticket. So we are going to be, we will have the keys of the kingdom indefinitely, basically. Extirpating a golden ticket is quite hard, and it's also quite stealthy once you gain it. So either the good guys find all the chains of event as quickly as possible and then remove us, or it's going to be very hard for them to detect us.
Right. So what I've done now, extracted the password hash of the account KRB-TGT. So that's the Kerberos ticket granted ticket account. So with that, we can create and encrypt our own tickets, which are going to be trusted by any service in the domain. So just to confirm this, I'm going to switch back to the first session we had. That's Leon Vargo's session. Right. If we do a K-list here, we're going to see the Kerberos tickets that we currently have for this context. We only have Leon Vargo tickets. Right. So now we're going to run a command.
And then relist the tickets and see what happens.
Yeah, so this command will basically create a golden ticket using the empty hash of the KRB-TGT account that we extracted. And we're going to tell that that we're going to be the administrator user in this ticket, and we're going to be member of these groups. We can actually choose which groups to be part of. 513, I think, is domain admin. Right, Daniel? Yeah. So now if I do a K-list again, now I have a ticket for the domain administrator. So now, from Leon Vargo's context, with this new ticket, I can confirm it again. There.
Yeah, we are going to do
This is 01.corp.local admin $. Yes. So now we have persistence. So we can just keep that ticket now, or actually keep that empty hash of the KRB-TGT account, lay low for a long time, move out from all these servers and clients that we've been on. Then, sorry?
Yeah, it never expires.
Exactly,
We
it never
have
expires.
indefinite persistence there.
Well, we can set the expiration time. Yeah, so basically never. All right, should we?
So
Yeah.
we won, but it hasn't been as straightforward as it some other times.
Yeah, I just want to mention that, I mean, of course, there have been some security features in place, but not all. The guys have talked about a lot more things that were not in place here, so we made our life a bit easier than it could have been. But that's also realistic. You can't have everything tomorrow. There's going to be some transition time, and when we come across things, we're going to have to take a step back and rethink, and that's basically going to increase the effort.
Yeah, if we go through our steps here, we needed more preparation time for the first phishing session. Not only information about who to target and how, but also on the technical side to avoid detection. Then when we were in, we weren't able to do any lateral movement as easy as in other situations. So again, phishing, and that raises, first of all, we need more time to prepare that, and then it generates more risks for us, the attackers. And finally, once we got access as local administrator on the SQL servers, we had labs preventing us from reusing local administrator credentials, and we had LSA protection and credential guard. And that raised a lot the time that we need to do something, because with LSA protection, we didn't show it today because of time, but if we want to bypass it, we're going to install a driver, and it's very noisy. And anyway, other possibilities are just waiting for someone to pop there. And the same thing happened with Credential Guard. They had some protections, but not all of them. So we used that small detail together with waiting for an administrator to log in. In this case, it was already in, but sometimes we have just to wait for them because there are no other ways to continue with your exploitation path. And all this kind of stuff maximizes the risk that you have to take as an attacker. It means that it's easier for someone to detect you. So all these countermeasures, even if the environment wasn't perfect, has influenced the entire attack strategies because we have been slower, we have been noisier in some situations, generating a lot of events in logs everywhere. And also it reduced a lot what we can do to continue, because if we didn't add a lockdown administrator that wasn't using the remote credential guard, we weren't able to continue. So that would have forced us to wait or poking around the network again and again and again, so making us way easier and prone to detection.
Yeah, so we're already out of time, but I just want to mention real fast the sophistication level. So as we've seen through this session, with all these added security measures that have been added to the environment, we've significantly raised the bar. And then we'll also raise the bar in the sophistication level needed to compromise the environment. And like Fabio and David said, there are other security features out there that wasn't implemented. So for example, IPsec rules would probably have prevented us from running remote WMI from the SQL server to the domain controller. And that would have raised the bar even further. So all these implementations that you add into your environment raises the bar on the sophistication level and the techniques needed to compromise your environment, basically.
Yeah. So basically, just to try to visualize this, if you recall Assign's session yesterday when you showed that timeline, you know, from when you get the first host until you get the entire domain compromise and detection time. So what we're doing here basically is that we are stretching that yellow part a lot more. So it's going to take us much longer time and effort to reach domain compromise from wherever we are. At the same time, we're taking the detection part and we're moving it to the left so that we're going to be able to detect our attacks much earlier. And all that overlap that you have between the yellow and the red, that's the time where you can detect things that are going on in your environment without it being too late already. Right, so that's the huge value of putting these pieces together.
And this stuff costs money. If you're the bad guys, you have to hire smart people, and you need a lot of time, and it's money, and it's a lot of money even before you start even to send your first packet to the victim. So basically, it's balancing a lot the efforts that attackers are taking compared to what you have to offer or what they can steal. And it's awesome. So yeah, we can win, but it's not all hope is lost.
Exactly. I mean, it's about a balance. It's not really about win or lose. I mean, it's about what level you are and what effort it takes and what you can detect and respond.
And I think this is an awesome exercise. A lot of companies can learn a lot of things from here, and it's extremely engaging. And sometimes after the blue team knows what happened, they're actually happy about it because they've been training without risks against someone that is very determined with resources and smart people and time to attack them. So it's a very useful exercise, and it's very fun too.
Yeah, we ran a bit out of time, but I think it was worth it. I think it kind of wraps it up and put things in perspective. So I hope you guys are happy with it. So thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much. You thought you had the last word. Magnus, do you want another go? No, I'm kidding. That was the last full-time session, but still we need to wrap things up. And I can't think of a better way to wrap things up than our own Marcus, right?
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
You want money
Yeah.
or? Well, yeah, some quick 2-3 minutes before we can leave and go home to whatever party, families, kindergarten, or whatever that is. But I think some reminders of the take-homes from today. Remember these big intrusions happening right now. Deloitte was named the #1 cybersecurity consultant in the world of year 2012. And they got hacked recently. It's a tough effort. Some people are really relaxed in terms of security. Equifax didn't put a known vulnerability on their public-facing web servers. So the question is, who's next? We don't want to be that one, right? So we need to think. And it is really a matter of culture in my world. I see some corporations that are very security-oriented. Some people, they're just trying to get away this most simple way they ever can. And this is a typical example. Actually, 70% of every computer hit by ransomware, they will actually pay. That's scary statistics. That's why ransomware threat actors make billions of money today. So that's not what I vouch for. I think you should take a better strategy. And it is tough. It's an asymmetric threat. You have to protect against all the different threat actors out there over time. And like the old saying is, you have to protect yourself from every vulnerability. They only have to find one. But it's very true for today. So you need to focus on the right things. You can't protect from everything everywhere, but you have to focus because you have less power than they have altogether. So one thing that I would like to talk about, I made this very small so that there can be no customer data in it. But this is from a real live environment, the dependencies. You can see the clusters here, like lots of computers sharing passwords and things. This is stuff that Fabio showed yesterday from our Truesec visualizer. But the lateral movement is, I think, the biggest problem in terms of real targeted attacks. The fact that you share admin accounts and stuff and you can't detect it. So just doing something. If you're interested in the visualizer, let us know, or whatever tool you're using to start to find out what dependencies you have and how you can mitigate that. Also, you can't think in terms of one-dimensional security anymore. You need to think in terms of doing both protect, detect, and respond. So you cannot just harden the system and do patching. You also have to assume breach and think in terms of someone will get in. How do we detect it? I think it was a brilliant session of Magnus and Suresh. And I think Suresh really mentioned the big problem. We don't focus on detection. We buy some antivirus or maybe something newer. But if you look at your organization, who's really looking? And when you find some malware, you just delete it. Looking at this red team exercise, the first thing a real threat actor would do is jump from that system to somewhere else. So we really need to focus more on protection and on detection. And I'm kind of concerned. I work a lot with banks and government agencies, and they really have large security departments. They have a lot of people working as security architects and other kind of fancy roles working in security, but they're working on a really abstract layer. The threats are in the computers. The code is running on the systems. You can have the best strategy in the world, but you need to start looking into the systems. Create something that can look into the systems and detect so that you can respond. And there is a gap between those architects and the people up there that work with compliancy and ISO standards and all that, and what's really going on under the hood. The attackers are under the hood. They don't care about your policy and standards. So please talk to us. This is my business card if you don't have it already. It's digitalized. Cool, huh?